This is the Henry's Child Podcast. Am I crazy? Or am I just raving?
Hey, Tom here, and I'm sitting with Rich Clinton on a dreary Sunday morning, and we are here for the 8th episode of the Henry's Child Podcast.
Number 8.
Number 8, indeed. And today, we wanted to get together and talk about the bands in between. And that is going to require a little bit of context. And so the context is the bands in between are being really the bands between the sort of the original Henry's Child and the reunited Henry's Child is kind of like layer number 1. And then layer number 2 is going to be any band that went out and played shows and recorded a disc or did both. What I don't think a lot of people realize, and part of the reason that actually stemmed even doing this as a podcast, was that Rich and I never quit playing together ever since the end of the original incarnation of Henry's Child, all the way to now, which is, and now is even recording this podcast.
It's playing
about not playing with anybody else.
Right.
I thought that this would be kind of a fun thing to get together and chat about. So I'm going to pick up the story at the end of podcast number 6, which was the origin story. And the way we had left it was Andy Macon, who played in Adrian Smith's side band, had come over from the UK and hung out with us for a few months. We cut a record. We played a show. We found out all the weird things about the UK, and he was enamored with chocolate milk, right?
When he found out all the weird things about the United States.
Yep. This is important because what happened is we had left Oregon. We had moved to the Bay Area with the intention of being the probe for Andy Macon. So Andy Macon had left, and we had got together with a immigration attorney, and we were not able to get together enough money to get his visa renewed, and we couldn't really prove he was working for us. We didn't assign whatever they assigned, 1099s or whatever. And so we were kind of trying to do this a little bit on the sly. Yeah. And so we had moved to the Bay Area, but we had done it separately. So I had moved first in with our friends, Michael Anthony and Logan Hawks, who used to, Michael Anthony actually used to work at KZL. What did Logan worked at KNRQ.
Right.
Back when it was kind of a rock station. It was 93.1, right?
I think so. I don't know. Anymore? What's radio?
Yeah, it's radio, sure. And I went and lived with them and eventually ended up getting a job in the city. So we had lived in San Jose and worked in San Francisco. And then Rich and Roger moved down. And it's actually Roger's birthday today,
yeah,
the day we're recording this podcast. Happy birthday, Roger.
Yeah.
So we went down to be the probe. So what the probe meant was we were looking for things like places to practice, places to live. Why don't you take it from here? So tell them where we moved.
Okay.
and why we moved there.
Well, we moved to a city called Vallejo, which is in the North Bay. It's above Oakland, above Richmond. Very urban area.
It lives up to its name, Vallejo.
Yeah. And the time that we moved down was not a good time in California history as far as that's when they were having rolling blackouts and the economy was poor. And so we moved to Vallejo because it was the only affordable place we could find in the Bay Area.
The only affordable place we could find, that's right.
Which probably doesn't even exist now as far as any affordability down there. But yeah, we went down trying to move the band forward at some point. But we should preface this that Doug had an emergency kind of operation.
That's
He
right.
had some issues, medical issues, and he was in bad shape. And this happened slightly after we had decided we were going to move. And Tom had already moved, and then Doug had decided that he didn't want to move. So we said, well, we're going to go ahead and do this anyway. And then, well, Doug had medical issues, so it was a moot point. So life's strange that way. So, yeah, we moved to Vallejo, looking around. and we found a little place in Vallejo, and Thom commuted into the city, and me and Roger tried to find jobs, and yeah, the fates just said no.
You did all kinds of stuff on the temporary day force. Like, didn't you like it was like wine corks or something, and like you moved them from one area to another?
We
or something?
did day labor, a lot of day labor. I've joked over the years that I'm a certified human forklift because I'm a certified human forklift. Yeah, one day we were removing 90-pound bags of corks for wine bottles.
Yeah.
The stoppers, and it was like 90 degrees, and we're out in a trailer in the sun, and it's like 100 and something degrees in there, and so yeah, these big bushels of corks, and we did that for a couple of days, and then we worked in a lumber yard for a couple of days, moving the lumber around in the heat again. Worked at a winery, just putting bottles on conveyor. So just whatever we could find. And so it drove everywhere trying to find work. And finally, it just came to the point where we couldn't do it and we had to come home.
Yeah, the only thing that I'll say about Vallejo was there was one kind of funny, well, two things actually. First off, I had never seen a couch burned on fire until somebody lit a used couch on fire in the alley behind our house. Remember that?
Yeah, and there was a certified crack house, like 3 houses down, that had like a T-bird in the backyard on blocks.
That people were living in.
And there was that one woman that would just wander the alley. Yeah, it was, interesting.
Well, the second one I remember. So sometimes Rich and Roger would borrow my car, and they would come pick me up at this in the city, and then we would drive back. And it's like a 40-minute commute. I'd usually work swing shift, so it wasn't that bad of a commute. But then we would get out of the car, and every single day there was one dude that would try to sell us something different. And it started out as like speakers, and eventually it made its way to like a microwave. And it always started out at like $40, and then he would end up taking 20 for it. And I'm just like, dude, I'm just not really interested.
Right.
Like, we don't even have room for our stuff. So we end up splitting up again.
Yeah.
So Rich and Roger moved back to Oregon, and I stayed in San Francisco for probably about another 9 to 12 months, I would say. And when you came back, you immediately started working on music.
Right.
And you would send stuff back down. And I was working at Keene, and remember we were trying to get that chick to sing for us.
Yeah.
And her name was Jennifer. And I would go over to her house with tapes that you would send me, and she would like kind of try to sing over them. And I remember it was San Francisco, so the housing was really super tight, and her neighbors would like use the old broomsticks like you see in New York, like shut up, shut up. And so tell us about that. So you came back and you recorded some music that was just inside you. I know we were really influenced by, I think we had just really discovered the Beach Boys.
Yeah, in earnest. Of course, I've as I've gotten older, I've gotten better about this, but the Beach Boys to me were just surf music. And it's not that I disliked it. I always liked it, but I never got why people kept saying that Brian Wilson is a musical genius.
And a genius, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for all these surf songs. So I'm like, okay, there's something here and I'm missing it. And I'm a musician. I love music. And so, I mean, I'm doing myself a disjustice if I don't go and like kind of delve into this and see what the issue is that I'm missing. So, yeah, I just started deep diving into Beach Boys, and Brian Wilson is a musical genius. All those, it's like comparing, Sgt. Pepper's to, I Want to Hold Your Hand era Beatles.
It's just incredible.
It's the same thing with Brian Wilson as it progresses especially from Pet Sounds forward, where he's not really actually going out and playing with the band, and he's full on crazy now. And the music, he's writing the music, and then his brothers Carl and Dennis are coming into their own, and it's just great stuff. So I'm highly influenced by that. Just the structure, the song structure, and just the harmonies and everything else. And so at that point in time, I was just experimenting, and Jarrett was still here, and because he hadn't gone off to go to the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences down in Arizona yet. So this is 2002, probably late one.
Yeah, 2001 probably.
Yeah, 2001, 2002, going in there, and so he set up his console and everything in the spare bedroom up in Crestwell. And we just recorded ideas that I'd come up with. A handful of songs and just different ideas. And then from there, we decided to build a studio in Springfield.
Yes, that is true, but we went out to probe other places. Do you remember that?
I do, yeah. I always remember this. California had kind of kicked our ass just because of costs and just, everything was kind of a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it's important for people to remember, too, at this point, was there still rolling blackouts, but $100 electricity bill was $350.
Yeah.
In fact, even later on, I remember like 3 or 4 years later, I got a credit ding for not paying like one portion because they would like let you do payments because it was so expensive. I remember like 3 or 4 years later, getting a credit ding or something for it. So California was quickly becoming not even an option.
Right. Yeah. So I remember me, you, and Jarrett were in communication about where else would work. So we thought, well, what about Texas? Texas is affordable. You can run a circuit in Texas. You can go from Dallas down to Houston, San Antonio, all that, and you do okay.
And one of our favorite bands, King's X, was from Houston,
from Katy,
area.
Katy, Texas. So we flew out 2 weeks after 9/11.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
I remember, was nuts.
Because I remember going through the Eugene airport, and they didn't have any of the security stuff set up. Even when we flew 2 weeks after 9/11, it was just like, "How you doing?" Walk on the plane, Thom was still living in the Bay Area, and we met up in San Antonio because me and Jarrett flew from Eugene to Phoenix to
and I flew out of Oakland.
You flew out of Oakland to San Antonio, and we did the tour. We
rented a car,
drove up to Austin because Jarrett had a cousin that lived in Austin and hung out in Austin, which is probably the only place I could live in Texas.
Oh, they call it the Bastion of Sanity in
Texas.
Yeah.
And then we drove up to Dallas, and I forced everybody to go to Oklahoma so I could see
that's right, we did.
My
we
origin
went to
story.
Yep.
And then we came back and spent the night in Waco and drove all the way down to Houston, went to Galveston. Yeah, so...
Oh, that motel room in Waco. Oh, my goodness.
I don't think Texas was for us. I mean, So anyway.
Well, the sheer gravity of being able to move was, even just to get there, the price of admission was pretty high.
Yeah.
It offered a lot, but I just feel like maybe at the time it just didn't offer enough. So, we chalked it up to it being a trip and came back home.
Mm-hmm. I think that's when we really started formulating the idea of building a studio, was probably after that trip. Because it's into 2002 when early 2002 when it starts to take shape. Mm-hmm. And
probably about 40% frustration and about 60% practicality.
Right.
Like we can't, as much as your dad would allow us to record out there, it just wasn't a studio. It wasn't something that we could practice in and call our own.
Right. So Jarrett and his father, Lee, started putting it together. And Thom would send up funds from San Francisco, and
in return, I'd get pictures of the progression of the painting and the construction.
Yeah.
Well, tell him. I mean, you found it was this guy named Leonard, right?
Yep.
He was this older dude, and it was brand new, but it was just a shell, right?
Yeah, it was just shops, kind of like what we're in here, like prefab shops that you see in kind of commercial industrial areas. And this was in Springfield off of South A Street behind Bullfrog. It was brand new. We had a hell of a time trying to find a place because it's all language, man. You go tell people you're going to build a recording studio, they're okay with it. You tell people that you're in a band and you're looking for a place to rehearse, and they just like, no.
Yes. Yeah, we ran into that sort of discrimination.
Yeah, we continued on with it and got it built, and it was very cool. That's only probably, we had it built. Were we completely done building it when you came back?
Yes.
Okay. So it was probably, I would imagine you came back kind of in the summer or late summer of 2002.
Probably would have been the summer of 2002. You and Roger went and rented me an apartment, a sight unseen.
Yep.
I had never seen it. I just trusted Roger and Rich so much. I'm all like, dude, so it has to be, I think the parameter was it had to be under $600 a month. And if it was 2 bedrooms, that was cool. But it had to have enough electrical outlets for all my computers and stuff. And I just couldn't let go of Keene that I was working at. And so they said, you can work 2 overnight shifts a week, which basically meant graveyard, which was just a horrible shift. I don't even know why I committed to doing it, because the reason I moved, again, was to work at Symantec.
Yeah.
So I went and I got a job. I got hired at Symantec, and they paid me San Francisco wages in Springfield. So I was like, oh my gosh, I had arrived. I was so cool. I didn't even have to look at my apartment before my friends rented it out for me. So they rented it. I moved.
Right.
We had the studio in Salem, and it was
Springfield.
Oh my goodness.
We're in Salem now.
We are in Salem now. Yes. So we've had a couple. That was a Freudian slip there.
Yeah.
But we had the studio in Springfield, and man, it was small, but it was really cool. I mean, Jarrett customized the control room. Mm-hmm. Like Rich said, this is before he went to the conservatory. Mm-hmm. Which Jarrett actually has a degree from the Recording Arts Institute or whatever. I mean, it's like a thing. It's what he does for a living now.
And then he had his internships in L.A.
L.A., yeah.
And that he got into, Studio Atlantis.
Studio Atlantis, yeah. Which we'll talk about in a sec, because
Sure.
that was a big deal.
Right.
When he did his internship there. So we got the studio, and the first thing that we did was we went and we recorded some of Rich's songs that he was working on in Crestwell. And there's one in particular that I wanted to play on this podcast that is a really, really good example of a transitional song, meaning that Rich had fully come into his songwriting ability. This is obviously without Andrew. So without a vocalist and somebody so not only without a vocalist, but also without a lyricist as well. Because Andrew writes all of his own lyrics. And all of a sudden, Rich not only wrote the words, but he also sang the songs too. And this particular song is actually a really special treat, because at the time, it was just the 3 of us and we didn't have a drummer. But we had subleased our studio for some other bands to rehearse in. And one of those bands was a band called the Courtesy Clerks.
Right.
And a guy named Ron. And Ron had left his drum set, and Jarrett played on this song.
Yep. It's I'm playing guitar and singing, you're playing bass, and Jarrett's playing drums.
Yep.
So this is the only song that we have of that grouping of us all doing that together.
Yeah. So this is a really special treat, and this is a song called Another Point of View.
the thing with me was I had always had an issue with my voice, and I'd always sing backup, but I really, really had to get over myself to just go ahead and sing.
Yeah, it sounds good. It's a good song.
Yeah, it's a good song. I mean, I wish I would have had more time, in prepping, but we really threw that together quickly. I can still see it in my head, us recording it. And I had that little tiny, it was Roger's Champ, that little tiny old Fender Champ.
Oh, yeah.
That entire guitar track is done with that tiny little
Isn't that
amplifier
funny?
in my telly. Yeah.
And those big Ron's big giant
There
drums.
were Ziccos. I remember they were like clear, like the Ludwig Vista lights.
Oh, yeah.
Like John Bonham
Yeah.
played, but they were Ziccos, and I remember it was just huge,
gigantic drum set.
Yeah, it's funny.
Little Jarrett back there playing. And this is also too. I mean, I know we got to move on, but this is also before Pro Tools.
Yeah.
This was all done on DA-38s.
Mm-hmm.
Saying DA-38s reminds me of what we did after Jarrett left. So we had thought about the idea of sustaining not only rent from bands, but also being able to record bands.
Mm-hmm.
So there were two bands that you and I recorded records for.
Right.
And it was Strong Medicine,
Yeah.
which was Doug Nev's band.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like Christian hard rock or Christian metal, I
Right.
guess. And Ego Machine from our friends Jerry and Mike and Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Recorded those on the DA-38s
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So anybody listening to this that might be, I don't know, 20 to 25, there's no real computer interface for it.
Right.
Jarrett had them stacked on top of each other, and you would just kind of arm the tracks that you wanted to record, and then people would just record. And it was kind of up to you to fast forward and move the tape around so that, punching in was virtually impossible for us. I mean, Jarrett could do it, because it was kind of his gig. But you remember doing those bands?
Yeah.
It was a trip.
Just, very old school. The only difference between a DA-38 and using, let's say, a quarter-inch tape or, half-inch or a reel-to-reel type machine was it was compact, and it had a digital interface.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a digital I/O. They look like little high. What are they like? They look like little DAT. No, they look like DAT tapes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were
Well,
dingy little tapes.
Again, we're just completely speaking in an antiquated format that, if you're 20 to 25, you don't know what we're talking
you wouldn't
about.
know what that is anyway.
A DAT tape was digital audio tape. It was like a move toward things becoming digital.
Yeah.
And that failed on a commercial. They tried to actually sell those in the stores as like an alternative to like CDs, and it just didn't fly.
Yeah.
But in the recording world, they did use them, just like ADATs before that, where it was like basically super VHS tapes that you were recording onto. In fact, I got to make a stupid little geeky point here. The ADATs are what we used to record Mumbles and Screams on.
Oh, yeah.
Pro Tools.
Yeah.
I mean, Pro Tools.
Pro
Arts,
Arts, yeah.
Tony Prevost Pro Arts, yeah. That was an early version of the DAT tape became like a miniature version of that. So then move forward, then technology.
Well, after doing a couple bands, we quickly realized that we were not producers.
Yeah.
Motivation-wise, I think we were pretty good.
Yeah.
And songwriting-wise, they just kind of had their own thing kind of going. But as recording engineers, yeah, not so much.
No.
So we tried that, and it was good, but not really good for us long-term, I guess.
And then, well, from there, Tom, what happened? I think this is when we moved forward to the next iteration.
We started a band.
Yeah, because Jarrett was still there, and Doug was floating around the proximity and kind of, was still getting over his whole...
He was getting better.
Yeah. So we started playing together a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I had gotten really into kind of fuzz stoner rock at the time.
Mastodon.
Yeah, Mastodon, Fu Manchu,
Yep.
And then, bands like The Hives, and then hardcore stuff like Refused. So, and I really liked the grooves that they would have in like the stoner rock, but it just, the song formats were never friendly, like radio friendly or melodically friendly enough to do anything with. So I said, hey, why don't we do this kind of fuzz stoner rock thing, but have more melody around it and, actually, kind of
Yep.
write songs that, you can be 4 minutes long, not 14 minutes long, and just, a stoner jam. So that's when we formed Attack Ships on Fire.
Attack Ships on Fire. Yep.
Which we got to give Andrew, props for that name, because he gave us. He used to say that was a great name for a band way back in the early 90s. It's like, it'd be a great name for like a hardcore band.
And we took it.
And
just like the Floater story with the Henry's Child name, did you actually call up Andrew and we're all like, hey, could we use this name? Or did we just kind of take it? I don't remember.
I think I asked him, but I don't recall. It's too long ago.
Yeah. So we started a band called Attack Ships on Fire.
Which initially was me, you, Jarrett, and Doug. And I was singing again because...
Right. We cut a couple songs with you on vocals.
Yeah.
Which was... and it's funny to revisit these names because sometimes we would name songs before we wrote lyrics for them. And I do very, very distinctly remember you recording An Exploded View of Uranus.
Yes.
The vocals for that song. We actually kept it around. And we kept the name, An Exploded View of Uranus, which we're not going to play today. We ended up finding a vocalist, and the vocalist was Mike Bell. Absolutely fit right in. Yeah. As just a total
quality human being.
Instant family member.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy is totally awesome. He was back then, and he still is now.
Yep.
In fact, Mike has taken the whole thing and almost made kind of a pseudo career out of it.
Yeah.
With Squid Hat Records, but that's 15 years after what we're talking about.
Yeah, and there's a little path to get to that point, but let's also add in there that Doug decided that this wasn't his gig. It wasn't his bag. He didn't really care for that.
Okay, so I kind of jumped the shark there a little bit. So before we got a vocalist, we actually got a drummer, and that was Aaron Don.
Mm-hmm.
And Aaron Don had played in kind of a bunch of stuff around Eugene.
Sick Nine, Blunt Point, Moth, and this is how we got Mike. Because Mike and Aaron were in a band back in the 90s called Dahmer.
Dahmer.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
So that came together, kind of old school, Eugene band kind of meeting up again.
Hey, I know this guy.
Yeah, I know this guy.
Let's try him out.
Right.
And we tried out Mike, and he hit it off instantly.
We had tried out a few drummers in between, and it was like, wow, no. But anyway, when we got Aaron and Mike together, and then Jarrett moved. Jarrett went down to the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences down in Mesa or Tempe.
Yeah, Arizona for sure. And he went off to go to school and get his degree.
Mm-hmm.
And that left the four of us kind of to our own devices.
Yep.
And we went out and we played a bunch of shows.
Yep.
And we played every weekend from Eugene to Portland and back, and every little party and Meow Meow up in Portland and
Porky's.
Yep. So we're playing these shows, we're doing this, we cut a record, and the record was aptly named Attack Ships on Fire.
Right. Our eponymous debut.
And I wanted to play a track from that first recording. And the track I want to play is called Jeffrey Dahmer. And Jeffrey Dahmer is about reality TV. And there's really two things that were very captivating about Attack Ships on Fire. First off, it was a lot more freeing than Henry's Child. So the song you're going to hear, for example, has like a fuzz bass on it, right?
Right.
And these big drums. Mike's approach to songwriting from a lyrical perspective was a little different than what we had done with Andrew in the past.
Right.
So with Andrew in the past, we would kind of jam, and he would have poetry, and he would kind of mold that poetry. Mike would lock himself away for days, almost a week on end, and then come with the finished product itself, just over the music that we had created.
Right.
Which is great. It was just kind of a different way to do it, but we weren't really used to it. And so sometimes he would have lyrics that were a big surprise. And so in this case, one of the things that I really like about this song is just kind of the snarkiness with the lyrics, and they're very, very clever. Let's put it that way.
Right. I do want to point out Jarrett recorded this for us.
Yes, yes, Jarrett did record this in the Springfield studio.
Right. So it must have been right before he left. It had to have been.
I'll have to pull out the CD and see what the copyright is on it.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's why it sounds so good, because Jarrett was doing. We didn't attempt to do this ourselves.
Oh yeah,
so.
we definitely. That's. I'm glad you mentioned that, Rich. That is true. So Jarrett recorded this, and this is Jeffrey Dahmer.
Gentlemen, I give you the future.
Now, the first thing you probably noticed in listening to that track was that it sounds absolutely nothing like Henry's Child.
That is nothing like Henry's Child at all.
Which became a little bit of a bug. It bugged me, A
little bit, but some of it was done intentionally.
It was completely done intentionally, but I had to explain myself all the time. People would come and see it, me and you.
Yeah, it showed at Attack
half
Ships
of Henry's
on Fire
Child
shows.
playing Attack Ships on Fire type music, which I still like. I like all kinds of music. It was just fun. In fact, that's exactly what it was. It was the anti-Henry's Child. We wanted to try something completely different and see what we could do and just have fun and not have to overthink it and do this, overblown, and just, it was fun. A little bit more punk, a little bit more, straightforward. But people didn't understand, and I'd have to explain all the time. It's like that we're doing this on purpose. This is like therapy in a way.
Yeah, they didn't get it from the perspective of they thought they were going to come and see another incarnation of Henry's Child.
Right.
And after we gave them two, you and I finally wised up and we're kind of like, let's just try this other thing over here. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun being exposed to other bands, being able to play with other bands we couldn't typically play with, play in other places that we typically couldn't play with in Henry's Child. Yeah, I thought that was really great. It was a lot of fun.
And to have next to no effects for me, it was just plugging in, I had an old Laney 50-watt Laney AOR. It was like a Marshall clone, and just with a Les Paul, just, and I'd use my Maytones and just plug it in, don't even have to worry about clean at all. Just crank up the amp and go.
Right.
So I mean that was fun.
Which is funny because I added effects. So I added like fuzz and distortion to the bass. And
we'll call that type of guitar playing bareback.
Bareback guitar.
Bareback guitar.
Totally. Even though we always play music safely.
Right.
So that was Attack Ships on Fire. And so with Attack Ships on Fire, we recorded that first album. Jarrett recorded it for us. We then went and we did a whole other record.
Yeah.
At the very ending of the recording of the second record, Rich and I decided to quit Attack Ships on Fire.
Right.
And we did it with probably the most amount of integrity that we could. Mm-hmm. And we really honored in a very authentic way what we had created with Mike. And so what we decided to do was we decided to give him all the intellectual property,
right,
which included the first album, all of the songwriting on the second album, the name, and everything that kind of went with it. We just kind of wanted to walk away.
Right.
And part of that bargain was to help them find other musicians.
Yeah.
And so Rich and I had quit, and Rich continued to play with them depending on what variant that they needed. So I remember, so there was like a Paris theater show that you played bass with them.
Played Paris Theater and Ash Street.
Up in Portland.
In Portland, yeah. I played bass, which was interesting, And then, I don't know, that summer, they were still looking or they had lost their second guitar player, or something was going on. And anyway, they asked me if I would fill in playing guitar on a tour. So I went on tour with them all the way down to California and Nevada and Arizona. And so that was my last tenure with Attack Ships on Fire. But in the interim, I had been in communication with Doug. And I said,
yes.
And he was feeling a lot better, and his, physical issues had been taken care of. And we just started talking about like we would like to play together again, and just kind of do something along with what we've always done, kind of a Henry's Child type thing. And asked Tom. Tom wanted to come along. He wanted to be a part of it too.
Absolutely.
So we got together, me, Doug, and Tom, and started jamming in a trailer.
In a semi-truck
trailer in
Salem.
And we didn't know what we were going to do for vocalists initially. So I was wandering through MySpace. It had been MySpace.
MySpace, yeah.
And our buddy Brian Forster, who we'd known all the way back in the very beginnings of Henry's Child, he used to sing in a band called Taxi Cab Floors. Now, Taxi Cab Floors was a pretty straightforward metal band, and Brian had kind of a het-filled kind of metal voice thing going on, and I didn't know that Brian had the voice that Brian has. He has a great voice, until I wandered into a video that he had of him singing Roadhouse Blues by The Doors. Brian can sing.
Yeah.
And a light bulb went off on my head. I was like, I'm going to contact Brian and say, hey, would you be interested in singing in this new thing we're putting together?
It's kind of perfect because we were practicing in Salem.
Yeah.
And he lives in Salem.
Yeah. So that's how we formed the band version of First Sleep, which was a name that I had put onto my solo stuff, the early stuff that we did in Cresswell with me and Jarrett. And
talking about the song we just listened to 2 songs ago on this podcast. Yeah.
So then we formed First Sleep, which was me and Tom and Doug and Brian Forster. We recorded a demo with a friend of ours, Shane Hall, just to kind of get something out there. So we just started playing shows and started.
It was a 4-song demo. We did it in Shane's garage.
Yep.
That was actually a requirement for the Iris Festival.
That's right, the Iris Festival in Kaiser. And
the Iris Festival in Kaiser was kind of like a competition, and we ended up winning the competition. And I think it was like a $500 gift certificate to a music store or something like that. But it was the first time after Attack Ships on Fire coming out and being in, like 100% control of a band and doing something a little more along the lines of Henry's Child. And so in this particular case, there was kind of less of a confusion from the crowd as far as like what Rich and I were doing.
Right.
Plus we had Doug, who was in the the 97 to 99 incarnations of Henry's Child. So it was probably the closest that a fan could get to a reunion. It paid off for us really well. We ended up doing that 4-song demo, and then we ended up doing a full-on record called The Hours in Between, and that was recorded very loosely around actually many different areas. So the drums were done in McMinnville.
Right.
Do you remember the name of that studio?
I don't.
It was like a jazz studio.
Yeah.
They had a whole room devoted just to a grand piano. So these cats knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And Doug comes in and does all the drum tracks there.
Mm-hmm.
So by now, Jarrett had finished the conservatory and got his degree and was doing an internship in Los Angeles at a place called Studio Atlantis. In addition to his internship, he had started a studio in Santa Monica called the Santa Monica Recording Studio.
Yeah,
I don't remember what it was called.
Yeah.
But we ended up doing the guitars and the bass and the vocals down at his studio in Santa Monica.
Mm-hmm.
And then we mixed the whole thing at Studio Atlantis where he was doing his internship.
Right.
So with that album, Jarrett had made a contact, and we ended up getting the recording mastered by Bernie Becker's son.
Right.
And Bernie Becker did Radiohead and Tenacious D and a couple other really big names. And
right.
we were pretty proud of that. I mean, that was a good record.
Yeah.
And the momentum around that allowed us to play a little bit more out and about. So we played Salem quite a few times. Not really quite as much as we did in Henry's Child, but definitely getting out there and doing it. I remember 3 or 4 places in Salem that we pretty much like every month we would go play.
Sure.
And
played in Eugene also.
Eugene.
And played the Hawthorne. That's our Toby connection. Remember, we played the Hawthorne as First Sleep with Grinch.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, there's another connection.
We
That's
actually
good.
have video of that. That's the one where we had that kid come out and do all the video.
That's up on YouTube. I
Yeah.
think in my personal account too. Oh, it's so funny. So with that particular incarnation of First Sleep, the best song, the song that we got the most accolades for, was a song called "The Other Side."
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about "The Other Side"?
Personally, I like the song. I didn't think it was our best song on the album, but somehow it seemed to resonate with people. And hey, you just take what you're given, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really proud of Ghost. And
Ghost is a good song too. Yep.
And This Mortal Coil. I mean, we're getting our sea legs, and you can kind of see that we're moving into what we were listening to at the time was influencing us, which is like this kind of more modern version of prog, like Porcupine Tree and Marillion and bands like that. So that influence, I've always been able to like take influences and turn them into our version of our influence. So we don't wear our influences on our sleeve.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, no, I went back and listened to that album a couple weeks ago, and I was just kind of blown away that it's still good. It still has, validity. Doesn't have any like, oh, you could tell this was done, 15 years ago, whatever.
Well, now that, it's funny you say that because I was just thinking about that. Now that it's 2018, is this 11 years old or 10 years old?
It's actually 10. Yeah, that's
10?
right. It's 10 years old. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the most requested song from First Sleep, and it's a song called "The Other Side."
There's somewhere that you need to I'm drifting farther out to sea. Keep on drifting, I'm drifting farther out to sea. Keep on drifting, I'm drifting farther out to sea. Can you see me? Can you see me?
Oh, the Other Side.
Right.
What a good song. There's a lot of good songs on that record.
There is.
There really is. So, for a very brief period of time, we had experimented with bringing other people in.
Right.
And all the while, we had established a studio in Salem during the recording of what was going to be the next First Sleep album.
Yeah, but there's an important point. Jarrett came back. We offered Jarrett a position in the band, and Jarrett moved back up to Oregon from L.A. And from there we built the studio. So, of course, Jarrett and his dad Lee again, doing their magic,
built another studio,
and that's where we're sitting right now doing this recording.
Podcast.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we said, okay, we're going to take this seriously. What do we want to do? We want to move this to the next level. So what are we going to do? So started messing around with concepts, and I came up with an idea for a concept album. We decided that we were going to reinvent ourselves a little bit. So we threw some names against the wall, and we wanted to vet something that somebody else didn't already have. It wouldn't be confused with another band or anything else. So we came up with 7 Second Circle. So 7 Second Circle is First Sleep. It's just a name change.
Just a little bit of a different package on the outside.
Yeah. But now it included Jarrett on guitar and keys. So it was me, myself, Thom, Brian, and Doug. So we decided to work on this concept album and do it in a way that we'd never done an album before, which was just write as we go. Now, every album we'd ever done in the past, from any iteration of any band that we'd been in, had been done exactly the same way. Bunch of guys get in a room, write songs together, record songs.
Yep.
That's how it's gone.
Yep.
This one was different for various reasons. Part of it was the tyranny of distance. Thom being in Portland, Jarrett being in Corvallis.
So by now we had all moved to different areas of Oregon.
Right.
With Salem kind of being the central node, kind of.
Right. I just kind of started taking it upon myself to just write ideas at home and record, and then we'd get together and kind of flesh things out. And that's why it took us 5 years to put the album together. But there's an important little asterisk next to this. We didn't just come in and do big blocks of 2-3 weeks of recording. It was like a few days here, a few days there, a few days here, a few days there.
Yep.
And but yeah, I mean, when we were done and we finally got our album out, Divide, probably the best thing. It's the best thing I've ever done in my life. I will stand behind that.
It's really good.
Right.
I mean, it's got 25 years a person who contributed to it. It's got all of their experience and wisdom, and it's just an amazing package. In fact, it was so amazing. One interesting story, and we could even have a full podcast about 7 Second Circle.
Oh, yeah.
It's that good. We originally were not going to duplicate the album. So we didn't really have, we had artwork, but the artwork was in electronic PDF form where each song had like pictures and the lyrics, and it just was this big kind of electronic booklet. We had released it on Bandcamp and, got a few sales and a few little kind of kudos here and there. But a German distribution company reached out to us and said, we would like to pre-order like 200 discs. Yeah. We're like, well,
we don't have any.
We don't have any discs. So what they ended up doing is this particular company called Just for Kicks Music over in Germany liked it so much they prepaid, just sent us money over PayPal, enough to cover the cost of duplicating the CD.
Right.
So we actually printed 1,000 CDs. Yeah, that was it.
Well, we were fortunate enough to get quite a few reviews on different sites online that seemed to give us traction all over the world. So selling to Germany and Scandinavia and England, and I think now that, didn't you say, Tom, that we've sold discs to every single continent aside from Antarctica?
That is true. Yeah. That is true. I have personally sent from my office discs to Africa, Asia, of course Europe, Canada, South America. South America ordered like 50 of the discs too. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And it was all based off of reviews from big websites in the niche of prog rock,
right,
or this kind of new movement of prog. Every time that we play, it's a new experience. We don't play it very often, but when we do, it's a new experience, and we always get new fans, and it's a lot of fun. And one of the things that we did in preparation for a Wow Hall show was we put together videos that synced with a click track that was inside of our ears. So when we would hit certain parts of the song, words would pop up on the screen and there would be movement inside of the video. And of course, this all is from Rich's brain because he's got the media design degree from college. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And in fact, we have a video up online, and the video is for a song called Bitter. And that video is the original one we would sort of put behind us when we would play the song.
Right.
So what do you think? Should we play Bitter for these guys?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Here is Bitter from 7 Second Circle.
There's danger in silence. There's danger inside of me. I know it's a bitter pill to swallow. The silence is violent. The silence is killing us. I know nothing left to fill the hollow, so hollow. There's danger in silence. Silence is violent, so violent.
So that was Bitter, and of course, I'm very proud of that song.
You're not bitter about it?
I'm not bitter about that song at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. No bitter pills to swallow on that. So, yeah, it's been what, 2 years, I think? Going on 2 years now since Divide came out.
Yeah, it came out in the end of 2015, and then
Right.
the copyright on the CD is 2016.
Okay, so now I'm starting to formulate ideas for the next 7 Second Circle album. I've been in contact with Brian, and of course we're in the middle of this Henry's Child recording right now, but as soon as that's done, which we're very, very close, we'll move forward with 7 Second Circle. There's always going to be something going on. There's always going to be something going on. That's what we do. We're our own little Brill building.
Our own little Brill building. Yes, indeed. Getting out there and getting it done.
Yep.
Wow, we covered a lot today, man.
Yeah.
That's like probably 13 years worth of different bands and the bands in between.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
So as you can tell, Rich and I never stopped playing together.
Nope.
We've always been involved, even when we weren't living in the same state. We
Right.
still got together and traded ideas and created what we could.
24 years?
Yep, all together.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we met in 94 for sure, because the first Henry's Child show was like, we may have met in 93, but you joined the band in 95. So yeah, we're 23 years.
April 1st, 95 is when I joined.
Aptly dated.
Aptly dated, yes. Well, that is just the story from Rich and I.
Right.
And there's a lot more to cover. And I think we're going to actually do a part 2 of this where we include Andrew Smith and what he was up to in between bands.
Right.
And that's going to include Mnemonic Machines and quoting scripture.
Memory of
and
Green.
Memory of Green. Yep. So we've got a lot more to cover.
Yep.
But in the meantime, I'd like to thank you for listening, and especially thank you for making it this far with us. We do love to talk about ourselves, and we're glad that we have an audience that is captive enough to participate with us. Speaking of participation, if you liked what you heard, please go to either the Google Play Store or the Apple iTunes Store and give us a 5-star rating and maybe a nice review, because that will allow us to keep creating these episodes for you. And of course, you can always go directly to our website for all the latest gig information, the latest info for these podcasts, and our latest songs. And that website is henryschild.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.